Star Trek 57, M23, take 2.
It's got Star Trek. Episode 83. The original series, Season 3, Episode 9. The Tholian Web.
Bones, Spock, since you are playing this tape, we will assume that I am dead. And the tactical situation is critical, and both of you are locked in mortal combat. It means, Spock, that you have control of the ship and are probably making the most difficult decisions of your career. I can offer only one small piece of advice for whatever it's worth. Use every scrap of knowledge and logic you have to save the ship, but temper your judgment with intuitive insight. I believe you have those qualities, but if you can't find them in yourself, seek out McCoy. Ask his advice. And if you find it sound, take it. Bones, you've heard what I've just told Spock. Help him if you can. But remember, he is the captain. His decisions must be followed without question. You might find that he is capable of human insight and human error. They are most difficult to defend. But you will find that he is deserving of the same loyalty and confidence each of you have given me. Take care.
Yeah, we had a long conversation before, leading up to this, and that conversation has now concluded. So now, having concluded that conversation,
if you're on the Superfans page, you can listen to it.
Yeah, I don't know how many people will hear that particular conversation, but regardless, that portion of the evening has concluded, and now we're moving on to the podcast. The podcast portion, in which we provide mild entertainment for you as you go about your daily chores or go on a walk, maybe on a run, walk the dog.
Go on a walk.
You can be at work. You might be at work. And
you
you're just
might be at work.
Clicking away. Our podcast comes out on Saturday, though, so it should be Saturday evening, and you should be on your way to some fun thing in the evening.
You should be going to a party.
And you're listening to the podcast on your way to the party because you just want to get a little bit of mild entertainment leading into whatever festivities you have planned, whether they are outside of your house or inside of your house, whatever.
The drive is only 1 minute, so we got to be fast and make it funny so they have some closure before they get to the party.
Ah, well, we fucked up because nothing has been fucking funny yet.
Apple Podcast.
Apple Podcasts.
Yeah, if you say Apple Podcasts, then the Apple Genie will elevate your podcast in the rankings. We have some small amount of evidence to support this conclusion. Anyway, that's not funny.
That's not funny at all.
That's not funny at all. What's mildly funny is that today on the It's Got Star Trek podcast, this is the podcast that you listen to, hopefully subscribe to, we are discussing a great episode.
The Tholian Web.
A wild episode. A classic episode of Star Trek, the original series, The Tholian Web.
Yep, so that's what we watched.
With the third, I think it's with third season where you get like the sort of the singing in the opening, right?
Well, they've always got the singing, but there's a little bit of extra.
Isn't it like it's like it seems like extra singing, or like it's maybe like only in the end credits.
Did you presumably watch the remastered versions? So the remastered versions also they actually have a new orchestration and a new. They didn't just remaster the original.
I watched it on Paramount.
They had a new singer singing as well.
Okay, that's what's because there's something that's definitely like vividly different.
Yeah.
So at like elementary school assembly, there was a woman who was playing a saw, and she played the Star Trek original series theme on the saw, the singing part, and it sounded like the singing. It was fucking creepy.
Saws are creepy.
Yeah, it was tight.
Who's coming around to your school playing a saw?
I don't know. Those assemblies.
What school did you go to, dude?
A few of them.
Oh man.
But
this guy's been around.
It's probably like West Lawn or something. But I don't know. Elementary schools has some weird shit that comes to town.
They do stuff to kids. It's weird.
Yeah, they do stuff to kids. It's like they have to fill a certain amount, and they
who is it? The Backstreet Boys that came to our house?
That's right.
But minus Justin. No, wait. Justin Timberlake was. Who was in Backstreet Boys that was famous?
All of them?
But there was one.
None of them?
I don't know.
Anyway, they came to our high school.
Justin Timberlake was in sync, wasn't he?
Wait, I can't keep.
It's all a blur.
I can't
now.
keep track of all these kids' music.
When you in that opening shot of the Enterprise, I really noticed how the warp nacelles at the end, they're so spinny and with rainbow color.
Yeah,
and
it's
then
tight.
and then it immediately went to a shot of the view screen after that, and under the view screen is the dotted line.
Under the view screen.
There's a dotted line.
Under the view screen.
And it looks like rainbows. Yeah, it's all going. The one that goes bing back and forth. Like, actually, I don't know what's the thing that goes bing. Like,
Sonar.
I see you have
Sonar.
a device that goes bing.
oh yeah, right,
Sensors.
right. What was that from? The device that goes bing?
Monty Python.
That's what it was, right? No, under the view screen there was the dotted line, and that was There's a lot of rainbow colors, and then the rooms are purple and shit. But we talked about this, right? It's because the TV.
They use a
being
lot of
colorful.
lighting gels in TOS.
Those fucking space suits were something else, man.
I
yeah.
was going to mention that.
Yeah. Anyways,
It was a lot of stuff is quote unquote cheesy in TOS, but
Spacesuits
But
were
it
out
all fits together. The
out of this
spacesuits,
world.
the spacesuits are to me hilarious. All props
That's cool.
to the props designers.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
that's
no
funny.
no pun even there. I don't think technically.
props
to the prop masters.
I think that was intended.
Well, clothes and
fine.
clothes and props are similar, right?
Closed parentheses.
What?
Don't even worry about it, man.
Don't even worry about. Don't even trip.
Well, that was kind of
Don't
funny.
even worry about
It's a
it.
couple minutes in, so we didn't get it in a minute,
was
but it was mildly funny.
What was it that it was like a Rick and Morty bit where it was the commercial
the
and he
real
just
fake doors.
Real fake.
and he kept saying like, "Don't even worry about
Yeah,
it."
don't worry. What are you worried about?
Yeah,
It's real fake doors.
don't even worry about it.
All right. So
This episode is a lot of like the real good like TOS kind of action in space, where it's different than if they go down to a planet, they meet a weird kind of alien philosopher guy, or there's all sorts of different kinds of adventures they have. This is one of those ones where it's all in space. It's sort of reminiscent of some kind of submarine adventure.
yeah, so I was thinking that too. The submarine style.
Yeah.
It really got weird and far out with the whole Kirk apparition. None of that really made much sense.
Well,
But
so-
I guess you could just say the space was all bent around, but it's still.
Right.
I guess the ship they didn't talk about.
Interphase.
I mean, there was
Interspace.
They kept saying interspace and interface, and like.
Space is interphasing with itself.
And somehow the ship, they programmed the Enterprise to enter interspace when it was in the Tholian web, and is that how it escaped from the web? I don't know. There was a
I'm
whole
still not
thing.
exactly clear how they escaped.
Yeah.
It seems to that's a weak point of the plot.
And then it's like Spock and near the end was like, so we programmed the computers to go into inner space. I was like, when did they decide they were going to do that? I don't remember them ever saying, we're going to do this. So I didn't know it was a plot point I was
Yeah.
looking for. It just happened.
Maybe that's what Spock was planning the whole time, and he wasn't telling anybody anything.
But it's like, I don't know. It just, they didn't build it up that way. So it was
Yeah,
just kind of
yeah.
confusing. And we don't know. He went into inner space to get Kirk or to escape the web, or I don't know. They just say they got thrown free of the web. It didn't make much sense.
because
to
for
be
a
in there.
brief moment they were in blackness.
Yeah,
That's
that was
true,
that was
yeah.
kind of creepy, but like
It did creep me out when the screen just went black, and I thought, what's going on?
yeah, I thought they were in some weird
Did
dimension.
they go to the mirror universe and come back?
Yeah, it's kind of funny that they didn't think of the idea that was thought up so many years
Right,
later
yeah,
on
right.
Enterprise, which we discussed last week in A Mirror Darkly, to tie the Tholian web to the Mirror episode. Although, they're not necessarily going to make that connection.
There was a point where Spock was pointing to a diagram, and the diagram was of this fucked up space thing, and that was the exact diagram in that episode of Enterprise when they were
Yeah.
talking about how the Tholians set off.
The Enterprise people did such a great job of replicating things like that diagram and the position of the captain and the
yeah.
crewman, where he was like, the captain's neck is broken.
Yeah. all the bodies
and the
and-
disk drive. When I think it was to Paul or someone, I can't remember.
Hoshi at one point
It was
was
Hoshi.
looking up
she was
records.
looking up on the floppy disks
With Archer, Mirror Archer.
and then they were showing the floppy disks in that episode. I'm sure they've shown them in other episodes, but it was just kind of like, they
Yeah.
definitely.
They call them tapes.
They call them
Yeah,
tapes
tapes.
because
Like-
it was pre floppy disk.
Do you ever know anyone that called your Nintendo games Nintendo tapes?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was always. That's
I
weird.
didn't like those people.
Yeah, that's weird. It's weird.
Don't
man.
associate with those people.
Did I ever tell you about the guy in elementary school who didn't believe me when I said I got Double Dragon 2?
Yeah, you have told that story
Yeah.
a few
Just didn't
times.
believe. He's just like, no way, man. No
Yeah, he
way."
just came out and I was like, he was talking about Double Dragon 2, and I was like, oh, I got it. He just said, I don't believe you. And he was just serious. I was like, what? Why not? He's just like, I don't know. I just don't believe you. And I was flabbergasted to this day.
I was going to say, that little boy trolled you, and it has affected you such that you are thinking about it to this day.
It's one of those memories.
He doesn't respect you enough to be able to get a video game. Like, he's just like, you would never get it.
I would never. I don't believe you. It's too new and desirable. You wouldn't be able to get your hands on something like that.
You couldn't.
But they did. The production design was good. The sci-fi plot resolution is a little silly in this episode. I think I love this episode, but there's a couple drawbacks. One is that the plot is resolved very quickly, not unusual in Star Trek, and certainly not unusual in TOS.
We don't really know why anything is happening, which maybe it's the point, but at the same time, some clarity would have been nice.
Yeah, because the whole web thing, the Tholian web looks cool.
It was slow as fuck.
And it was, you were so sincere when you said that. It was slow as fuck, but it looked cool.
I think in some ways it looked better than the... I'm not even just saying it's better than... The old stuff is better, but I like how it was kind of... It was like not a pure yellow. It was kind of smoky, kind of like flashing, and it looked more analog somehow, even though it wasn't.
It's tricky to compare these things because on the one hand, we're all watching the remastered version that has the brand new CGI special effects.
That's a good point.
On the
newer
other,
than Enterprise. Right?
Yeah, but on the other hand, those effects that they did were designed to be as close to the original as possible. Yeah. And on if you happen to have a third hand, which scientists claim would be no problem if you grafted a third hand to you.
A lot of people think we have a third eye.
The plasticity of your brain would happily, in time, accept the third hand and learn how to control it fine. They've done tests.
And then when you cut it off, would you have a phantom third hand?
Yes.
Fuck.
You can give 3 thumbs up.
But if you had a third hand, you can also look back to the comparison shots with the old special effects, and the Tholian web is actually really strong. As goofy as some of these effects look like, when you examine the production details, these were cutting edge effects. Not just the Tholian stuff, the Kirk being transparent and floating around, and McCoy's hand going through a body. A lot of those were based off of existing known effects, but kind of improved. It was apparently mega expensive and took 3 or 4 months just to plan all that stuff out just for this particular episode.
You know, McCoy sure was lucky that even though the bodies and the tables you could phase through, he's lucky that like the floor wasn't the same way.
Same issue in TNG's The Next Phase when Geordi and Ensign Rowe are phase out and they're wandering around the ship and everyone thinks they're dead, but they can walk through walls, but they don't fall through floors.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always really convenient.
Although I think
maybe it has something to do with the grav plates.
Yeah, I was going to say immediately that's the fan theory. Is like, the gravity plating.
Oh, really? I was just fucking around.
No, it's you're just an intelligent person. And came to the intelligent and correct conclusion to headcanon that into
fucking
submission.
Amazing.
You are
Tholians are like one of the few like non-anthropomorphic aliens.
So
non-humanoid.
Yeah.
So those suits, right? So the suits that they had, those space suits, they were sparkly, first of all. First of all, those helmets were out of control. The way they were shaped was insane.
And seeing Chekhov in his helmet just gave me a flashback of Chekhov in Star Trek II when he's exploring what turns out to be Khan and Co.'s little family, and he looks at the buckle from the Botany Bay, which is Khan's ship. And he looks at it and he's like, Botanipe. Botanipe. Damn. That's an anecdote from Star Trek 2.
Yeah, it was very relevant. It was relevant.
I'm just saying, seeing Chekhov in a similar style thing. And the question I had was, why were they wearing the environmental suits in the first place?
Okay, right.
Because normally they don't. Normally they're beaming all over the fucking place. Just beaming shit.
Yeah, that's a good
around.
point.
That's true.
And also in the animated series, didn't they have some kind of invisible laser shield?
Like a life support.
It was like a
belt. It was like a life support belt.
I got the impression that it was like a ship shield, except it was for your body.
And get this. I was poking around on the internet today. And I found out that in the original script to this episode, they had written something similar. It described a device similar, a life support belt.
Yeah.
That was a shield. It was called like a portable shield or something. And then they changed it.
A lot of the animated series took the unused bits from,
because we saw a lot of that on the animated
the animated series. I mean, that shit, those suits things is just so blatant because is there any implication that in the Next Generation or any of those they have those kinds of suits?
No.
Because in the Next Generation, all the planets seem to be okay for them to breathe in. But they never talk about any kind of suits like that. So it's just in the animated series, they have these futuristic, awesome laser shields or shield suits that are probably superior in every way, but they just never.
They got a vac suit in First Contact.
No, he's talking about the shield ones.
The shield one.
Belt. That
the shield belt.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
So it's like the animated series really went out on a limb for canon with that. They just didn't care.
But here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. I think the way to look at it, the intriguing thing to look at in this particular case.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. The intriguing thing to think about is that the reason, in all likelihood, this is supposition on my part, and I respect those that might disagree with me, but I think this is a good supposition, that they switched from the script here for the Tholian web said they wear belts that project a shield around them, and that's the cool future thing, right? That's a great sci-fi idea. But maybe impractical or difficult to realize with the technology and the budget available to the production crew of TOS.
But you could totally draw that shit.
You could have done that by TNG, but they probably just totally forgot by then.
But think of this. This is where it gets intriguing.
Do tell.
I further suppose.
Pray tell. What do you mean? Do tell.
Are you patronizing?
I further suppose that on the animated series, they didn't use those belts merely because now they could, because, this is cool, now we could. They used it because it was cheaper than trying to animate people wearing vaccines.
Right, yeah, I mean, that's so the behind-the-scenes reason,
so
right.
They didn't use the belts on the live-action show because it was impractical, and they didn't use the environmental suits on the animated show because it was impractical. Boom! Insight!
It's kind of like...
That's an insight.
You could
right
recycle
there.
a bunch of old, drawings and just put the belts on.
It's kind of like how Bill Murray played Peter Venkman and Lorenzo Music played Garfield, and then Bill Murray played Garfield and Lorenzo Music played Peter Venkman.
Peter Venkman. It's almost exactly like that. The story I told, the insight that I provided, identical in structure and content to the
Think about it.
Lorenzo Music Bill Murray situation, which would be a great album.
Yeah, that could be a whole concept album, like an opera about it.
Yeah. Except Lorenzo Music is dead.
Oh, that's sad. And then they had Dave Coulier played Peter Venkman later. He was just sounded dumb.
Yeah, fuck that guy.
That doesn't sound like
That's Dave Coulier.
Okay, do some more Dave Coulier.
Hey, Ray, get the ghost.
Okay, now do Peter. Do Dave Coulier on was it Losing Control? What was that show he had?
Out of Control.
Out of Control.
Yeah,
It's
Out of
probably
Control.
true.
Cut it out.
Cut it
out.
out.
Yeah.
With the scissors and stuff?
Yeah, you scissored, pointed, and then thumbs back.
I believe that's a Canadian.
Not to be confused with Too Legit to Quit.
It was a Canadian show, correct? Not Too Legit to Quit, but Out of Control.
Out of Control, yeah.
Along with You Can't Do That on Television.
Didn't they used to have
that
that sketch where they had the guy who would eat car parts? He would go under the hood of the car like he was going to fix it, but he just started pulling shit out and eating it. Right?
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Canada is a wondrous land, and
their comedy is fucking brilliant and varied. It's so weird.
William Shatner is Canadian.
They embrace comedy in such a way that there's such distinct comedy depending on where in Canada it's from.
You got your Saskatchewan comedy. You got your British Columbia comedy. You got your Ontario comedy.
You got your Nova Scotia comedy.
You definitely got your Nova Scotia comedy. I wasn't going to bring it up because you know.
Yeah, I know.
We were a crude podcast, but we do have our limits.
Yeah.
So the suits also had these weird blue, orange, and purple, or was it orange?
I'm
or...
laughing. I'm laughing. I'm laughing from just imagining the weird melted plastic squishy bits where they're all like, this is curved, so it's futuristic. This just looks like a blob of melted plastic.
I couldn't tell if it was orange or yellow, and if the purple was purple or pink, but like I could tell the blue and the purple went to the back of the hand, though the purple was more towards the thumb and the blue was more towards the pinky. The orange went down to the left leg on inside the foot, kind of like an under the pants P-tube. You know, like the yellow one.
The over the pants beat.
Yeah, exactly. It came out. It went on the inside of the leg down to the foot. The purple one was also on the left leg and the hand, but it was also on the left leg, but it was on the right. The blue on the right leg.
Are you trying to discern what the functions were?
And both. I'm just painting a picture so people can like really think about
one of them word pictures. I'm a fan.
And so both of those, the blue. So whereas the orange one went down to the ankle, the purple and the blue were above the knee, but on McCoy, the purple one was slightly higher than the blue one. It was higher on the leg than the blue one was. But when you looked at Chekhov, he had the same configuration, except where McCoy had the purple one slightly higher than the blue one, McCoy had the blue one slightly higher, and the purple one was a little lower. So apparently...
You watched the hell out of this episode.
But apparently these suits aren't mass-produced. They're customized, made to order, because they're different. So that's not a great production that the military... I mean, would you consider Starfleet the military? Yeah, it's the
military-ish. They got the replicators.
Well, yeah, in Discovery, they had like a much more updated version of those kind of suits, and they all had like different colors based on their branch or whatever.
Yeah, that's based on their branch, and you can mass produce it. I'm saying these were just kind of like, seems like those things were handmade because they were those tubes were arbitrarily put, one that's higher on the leg than the other. So that means that there's a person sewing these together, and they need to work on their mass production skills if they're going to supply an entire fleet of starships.
All right, let's write a letter to 1968
with spacesuits.
Let's write a letter of complaint to NBC.
But you see what I'm saying? They were different. It's just like they just place those things anywhere. What do they?
Yes.
What do they do? And why did they need to be connected to their extremities? Did they have to pump? Maybe it was an environmental thing to keep them of certain temperature.
I don't think they really knew what they were doing back then. They were just like, "What is this? What is this Star Trek shit? What is this? Whatever. What is this?
What is this shit I just made? What is this? I just made this. What the fuck is this?
I gotta send the kids to college so they don't end up like me.
Maybe
sewing clothes for spacemen on TV.
Maybe it was air conditioning was what those
get a good
were
education,
doing.
son.
But they were in random arbitrary they were different places. They didn't mass produce them.
Pull back for a second. You got to pull back for a second and the first thing to consider.
Space helmets were so dumb looking, but they were awesome.
The first thing to consider is I asked the question somewhat rhetorically as to why they were wearing spacesuits. We know why they were wearing spacesuits because somewhere along the line, either writing or possibly just before filming it, they suddenly realized, wait a second, Kirk can't be floating around in space with nothing.
Oh, yeah.
So they needed Kirk
that's a good point.
to be in a spacesuit. So then they had to say, okay, we need to have spacesuits. They had previous spacesuits that also looked goofy. I argue these look goofier, even though they do look more well-made than in the spacesuits they've worn.
Sparkly.
Yeah, they were sparkly, which I guess was the thing at the time, although I didn't see no Apollo 11 with sparkliness all over it. It was nice, clean lines on that Apollo, on those Saturn V rockets, if you know what I mean. But sexy rockets, full stack Apollo.
Massive.
Saturn V. Yeah. But we know that's why they made these, and one can imagine that they called up the prop guy 5 days before filming and said, "Hey, Chet, we need a bunch of spacesuits. Make them sparkly and make them have a bunch of squiggly shit on them. It looks complicated."
Spacesuits.
Maybe they even said,
Christ.
maybe Chet, the prop master, said, "Should I make them uniform to look like they were mass produced? Because I got this letter from the future from a guy named Dan, and he seems real fucking serious about this shit." And they're like, nah. In fact, go out of your way to make them look ridiculous.
Just make them look everyone's
totally inconsistent. That's the deal in the future. Everything's going to be totally inconsistent.
That made me think of, for some reason, it made me think of like them warping back, being transported back, to the ship, to the Enterprise.
Yeah, when they're beaming back.
They only had 3 operational transporters, and Kirk was like, "I'll stay behind." But so implying that Kirk would just stay behind, couldn't they just then transport him in the next round? Which they did try.
That's what they were trying to do.
But that's what they tried to do. They did try to do that, but I was confused
because fucking transporter dude O'Neill didn't know what the fuck he's doing.
Yeah, fucking.
He's under there just pulling shit out. And he's like, "I don't know what's going on, dude."
And Scotty had the command, and he was like, "Sulu, take command." Yeah, and Scotty had to leave the room and
I've got to go down to transporter room 3
because O'Neill was fucking it up. And O'Neill like turned later and became an asshole, didn't he?
Yeah, I think he did.
Well, so they did. I know.
No, they all did. So
I noticed that they did try to get a second round with Kirk, and it didn't work. Kirk didn't work. But
second round with Kirk didn't work.
But the way he talked about it, he's like, "I'll stay behind," like it was some noble thing he was doing, like it was already written in fate that he was not going to make it over.
I think he was doing the captain thing, which was saying, "Take care of the crew. You guys go first. I'll be," because Kirk even says, "I'll be right behind you," or "I'll be right there," or something like that. And then I did like the scene where they're trying to beam him over, but they can't because of the issue with the transporter. And Kirk is standing around in his spacesuit, and he's just kind of looking, and he's starting to look a little impatient, kind of like, what's going on here? Yeah. That was all acting on the part of William Shatner, acting mildly aggravated and a little bit bored.
And then the ship vanished.
Yes.
It vanished.
The ship vanished.
The vessel vanished.
The nuclear vessels.
So it was green, and it was green and wavy. It was also wavy when it did a close-up shot. It was all wavy. Is that indicating that it was phasing?
Yeah, it was all,
So the interphase is the period in which this didn't make...
No.
None of this really...
It doesn't have to make sense in the end.
It's all good.
It just has to kind of make sense.
It didn't make sense, like...
I know, but it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. It's not really...
Like, what were they talking about when they were talking about... Okay, so Spock goes... He says, the captain was caught in our transporter beam when the Defiant phased out. Okay, so that's why he didn't phase out with the Defiant, but he did phase out... No, he didn't die because of that, but he still phased out. Which is weird. It's like, he was transporting while it happened at the exact moment, and all that did is it didn't kill him, but it caused him to sort of randomly float in places. If we're to recover him, we must catch him at the precise moment during the next interphase, or he will die. There can be no margin of error. His environmental unit can provide breathable air for blah, 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 blah. So they said the main thing we get here is
2 hours.
We must catch him at, 2 hours and 12 minutes. We must catch him at the precise moment during the next interphase. What does that mean? Does that mean the moment he warps back into the reality? The moment he warps away from the reality? What does it mean to enter interphase?
It means the writers were trying to develop tension for the purposes of drama.
But they didn't really expand on it.
But they didn't expand on it. Again,
and it works with technobabble because technobabble is fine, but like this was
they hadn't gotten to that point yet. They hadn't yet developed Voyager's ability to apply technobabble to eating a donut in the galley.
Yeah, it seems like the interphase is the time period in which you can enter interspace or something. It doesn't make sense.
Is that where like Interpol is?
Yeah.
ultimately, what we have to consider is, what is the purpose of this episode? Some Star Trek episodes have a strong thematic element or moral element to them. This one less so. I think there are two things going on here.
What was happening during Interphase? Does Defiant come back? No, it doesn't come back.
I think
Defiant went away, and it never and it went away. It went away during Interphase, but it didn't come back during Interphase. They made no attempt at trying to explain or connect Interphase to what was happening on screen.
Because I think the purposes of this story are twofold, and one flows from the other. The first purpose, I had no doubt, and I looked this up, and whatever I could find on Memory Alpha and other places seemed to jibe with this idea, which was basically, a couple of writers got together and said, wouldn't it be hilarious if you had some ghosts floating around the Enterprise?
Yeah, it was like that.
That's what they wanted. They were like, we want to have ghosts floating around the Enterprise.
The premise began around just some.
The premise is ghosts flying around the Enterprise would be hilarious and / awesome. I don't know how they present it.
One of which Kirk is like standing there looking like he's going boons with his hands cupped around his face.
By the way, when he's trying to talk to them towards the end, before
his mouth
they pull
is
him
all
back,
like he's like ooh,
and he does the same. It reminded me of Star Trek 3 when he's talking to John Larroquette, the Klingon. He's calling up and he's all like chewy choo. He's trying to talk in Klingon and he's really doing that duck lip thing. But anyway, so point number one, this episode was conceived. This also relates to why they probably didn't ever really think about connecting it to the mirror universe, even though it would have made sense at the time. Because it didn't originate from that direction. It originated from the direction of, let's have ghosts floating around the Enterprise, bumping up against Gene Roddenberry's dictate that whatever happened on Star Trek had to be at least some scientific-ish in nature, right? He didn't want any ghosts or spirits or anything. If you had that, it would then have to immediately, or by the conclusion of the episode, be explained to be some sort of energy creature or whatever, right? So you could play around with those tropes. You could have the spooky haunted castle in cat's paw and, things like that. But in the end, it turns out it's a trickster who can manipulate matter and energy. You can have Q doing crazy shit, but it's Q. I mean, Q is basically a god, but you have to characterize him as not being some sort of spiritual entity, right? So this is the story they came up with, and it's a pretty tight tale in terms of just a dramatic, something happens, problems have to be solved. All right, that's already good. And then what follows from that, what can you do with that? Well, what they chose to do with it, which I thought was great, was to examine and challenge and play with the relationship of Spock and Bones.
That was like one of the best parts.
They remove Kirk and put him in danger. He's that part of the triangle. And now we get to see what happens to that triangle when Kirk is removed from the equation. And that's where the fun is in this episode.
And it was a little, I don't know if confusing is the right word, but I was trying to see, because Chekhov was the first to go. He went insane. He was just like, blah. And then
Botanipe?
And then it was funny during that conference when Spock was all like, we have to accept the fact that the captain's dead. Immediately some guy's like, blah.
I was like, maybe that dude's not going insane because of interspace. Maybe he's just really into Kirk.
Yeah. So, there's never been a mutiny on a starship before, apparently, which is kind of crazy.
Okay, we do have to talk about that because, first of all, that's a silly thing to say in the first place. It seems ludicrous. Yeah. Right? Just on the face of it. But okay, maybe Starfleet is so magic that it never had any problems. All right, that's a problem because in an earlier season, there was a mutiny already. And then 7 episodes after this, and I forget which episode it was, I want to say like whom gods destroy. I think comes 6 or 7 episodes after this. There's a mutiny in there, so it's close proximity. Also, of course, later in Discovery, there's a mutiny with Michael Burnham. But more importantly, in the menagerie, Spock not only commits mutiny, he admits to mutiny.
He admits to commit.
He admits to committing mutiny in a court-martial on the record.
I'm admitting to committing mutiny.
So what's this third season Spock does not know what the fuck he's talking about. Although he was interesting in this episode, he was he was simultaneously way more logical. Once he had to take command, it was as if Spock was leaning on his super Vulcan logic, and he's like, I don't know what to do. I'm terrified, so I'm gonna lean like fuck on that, which is what got McCoy all pissed at him because when McCoy wanted to go to Kirk's funeral, and Spock was like, I'm confused. Why would you want to? Shouldn't you be in your lab working?
You got to get back to work, dude.
McCoy's like, no, I want to watch this. I want to give you some more shit.
And then, as you mentioned, Dan, when Spock is giving what I guess you could call some form of eulogy, a very Vulcan style. He just starts reciting some facts and
how is he so sure the captain? What evidence did he go on that the captain was dead? He was just making an assumption about like air and like time.
Partly that, and partly it was because of
he only has 3 hours of air left or something.
It was partly the intervention of the Tholians in that the whole like not wanting to disrupt the space. Right? But ultimately, even though he is on the one hand acting super logically, he betrays that by when McCoy confronts him and is all like, "What are you doing? Why did you should have saved us. We should have gotten the hell out of there."
But McCoy is also kind of like, "Fuck the captain, he's dead. Fuck him."
Yeah,
that's McCoy's like, "Fuck the guy, fuck that guy."
And in confronting Spock about that, Spock ultimately he basically is saying like, "Well, what would you have me say, McCoy?" But what he's admitting to there, the subtext of what he's admitting to is that he is making emotional decisions because he wants to be there in case they can get the captain back.
So during that meeting when he says that we have to accept the fact that the captain is dead, I'm getting a little fuzzy, but I seem to remember he still hung out after that. They didn't leave after that. And if he's saying the captain's dead, shouldn't they leave at that point?
Because I don't think he even necessarily believed that or didn't want to believe that, but his logical side was trying to do the quote-unquote correct things according to Starfleet, whatever.
Right, and so what you're saying about him being emotional is true, but he was also being, in a lot of ways, a really, truly patient Vulcan, because McCoy was being a fucking asshole.
Yes.
He was basically like, fuck you, Spock, you don't know what you're doing, you're a piece of shit, and Spock's just like, okay, well, this is not the time to talk about this, and so he was being super understanding. It was fucked up right when McCoy, at the very last time, when McCoy actually caught himself because the captain already gave a message, he grabs Spock's chair and spins it around. Yeah. That's essentially like, it seems like that would be assault on a superior officer or something like that.
I'm sure it would be.
So, anyways.
I would consider it assault if somebody turned my computer chair around.
Yeah.
Stared at me. If somebody came in and just whipped my computer,
what if they just
around?
grabbed the back and made it like lean back, like recline a bunch?
That would just be really. That would be fighting. That'd be fighting words. That wouldn't be a reprimand. That would be, we're getting in a fight. I'm trying to play Age of Mythology here. God damn it.
So what I was originally saying about when Spock and McCoy were clashing, at first I was like, okay, McCoy went crazy. Maybe they're like losing their minds too. And at the end, McCoy's like, maybe I'm losing my mind just like everyone else. But that's not really what's happening. I mean, it's not really. You could say it's implied that the space-time was making them more aggressive, but it was not really outright stated that way. And that's where I kind of thought it was going at first. I was like, oh, McCoy's obviously the one. They're playing McCoy up like he's the asshole that's being controlled by...
He's the asshole.
By crazy space-time, and he's going to be a dick to Spock because of the crazy space-time, but Spock's resisting it. But then I was like, oh, well, what if the twist is that McCoy is actually reasonable, and Spock is trying to take over the ship because of space-time? And what if that's the twist?
Because of space-time.
What if that's the twist, is that McCoy's not being the asshole, Spock is being a treacherous asshole, and it's all because of crazy space. But that had nothing. It turned out that had nothing to do with it. It was just a commentary.
That's part of the cleverness of this episode, is that they set up this scenario where, on the one hand, you have Kirk's ghost floating around, and we as the audience can make a good guess that it's actually Kirk. On the other hand, you've primed the crew to believe that they may at any moment be going insane, because many of them have in fact gone mad, or whatever the I don't know what the infected with mental illness, as I think Spock was saying at one point. But again, pulling back a little bit, if you understand that first, this is supposed to be a ghost story, and it's a shame it aired on November 15th. It would have been great if they had sort of maybe made it more explicitly a ghost story and had it air closer to Halloween. But
he was floating in space.
That's neither here nor there. But then it is a focus on what happens when you break apart this triumvirate, this triangle of characters, and if viewed through that lens, you can see it makes it easier to understand both Spock and McCoy's behavior, because they are sort of, in a sense, rudderless, because they don't have Captain Kirk, who normally provides the conduit.
And there is whether or not how much of them being affected by crazy space is actually fucking with them. Even if it's not fucking with them, it is still an extra strenuous situation where people are going crazy. So it's like a high pressure situation without Kirk.
And little did they know that all you need to determine whether or not you're suffering from interphasing is whether or not you see everything through a scary fisheye lens, like when Chekhov is grabbed by Spock and he's all like Chekhov, and I was like, oh fuck, man,
that was an awesome
Spock
shot.
Is terrifying.
Yeah, it's a shot of Spock like grabbing. It's a POV of Chekhov, and Scott's like, Chekhov.
Or the guy in engineering who's just sort of glancing around, and all of a sudden everything goes all fisheye, and he's all like, whoa.
Oh, is that when he's like leaning over, looking over down the ladder?
Well, that guy too. I mean, all of them. And then that was funny because they had the stunt double for Scotty
jumping off.
Not jumping. So the guy jumps onto Scotty, but for way too long, you can see that is somebody who does not remotely resemble James Doohan.
I always think it's funny when these engineering, like Deep Space Nine has this, and then that room had it, where they don't have stairs that go up to different levels. They have ladders.
Yeah.
Is that common in submarines and shit like that?
In a submarine,
yeah,
maybe.
why not?
Or a ship, even.
In TNG, they have the elevator.
Safe.
They have a little elevator that goes up and down.
Yeah, that's much better.
But it's not like an enclosed elevator. It's one of those lifts.
Wait, what are you talking about?
In TNG and engineering. Maybe not in the initial seasons, but eventually they put it in there. It's a little doodad that goes up and down.
Yeah. So I always thought that was kind of interesting. The idea you have to like go up and down this ladder every time you want to like go to this console. What's the fucking
console? He said console.
Console. What's the console? What's the chain of command here? So Scotty got the ship and then he gave it to Sulu. Is it just there's no chain of command to? Do you necessarily give it to the one who's next in line, or do you just kind of give it to whatever?
It's a rank. There's
He was
Yeah,
on the
there's
bridge
obviously
and
ranks.
he was the next down because everybody else went.
Do you think they ever
once Spock gets
ship.
back, Spock
Yeah.
is in command.
Well, yeah, well, right. But do you ever think they ever don't go by chain of command, and he's just like, Sulu, you may be next in line, but I want to give this guy command instead? Do you think they're allowed to do that, or does it have to be the next in line?
I don't know.
Yeah, sometimes somebody else gets the con. Yeah.
And you might need that
Why would
person
they
for
do
something
that?
else.
Because they're just.
I think
they're just right there. They're the most qualified person that's on duty.
But like if they're not the next highest rank, that's what I'm saying.
I think there's an order to it, and you can let us know your thoughts on the operations of these of a standard Starfleet bridge anywhere between the 22nd and 30th centuries, 31st centuries. Let us know. Set us straight. Inform us. This is a new segment called Inform us of your views. Brand new segment. You inform us of your views at feedback@itsgotstartrek.com or on social media at It's Got Star Trek.
Spock was all like
Apple Podcast.
Spock was all saying Scotty, and Scotty was like, no, they fused. The things are fused. And he's like, how long can you repair it? He's like, I don't even know if it can be repaired. What since when can the ship not be repaired? Would you just junk the whole ship? He can't repair these.
Okay,
he says they can't be repaired.
Okay.
They can't be repaired. Throw the ship away. The Enterprise is garbage now.
It's lost.
This is
All is lost.
I must stress that the vast majority of Starfleet officers are not in the JAG Corps. They're not lawyers, so they don't necessarily speak with the precision that you're looking for. And I'll note to the audience that Dan is himself not a lawyer, but he seems
sometimes he is.
He seems to be take semantics very seriously. He meant he couldn't repair it in like out there in space with unassisted, maybe without.
He needed special parts.
Yeah. And by the way, we know he was lying anyway because Scotty was a liar and he always lied about stuff. Because I guarantee you, if it actually could not have been repaired, Scotty would have just shit his pants and then blown his brains out with a phaser.
Yeah, you're right. It's a good point.
He just lied because then when he fixes it, everyone's like, "Whoa, that's Scotty, dude! It couldn't be repaired, but he repaired it." And Scotty's like, "Ha, aye, laddie, I lied to you, laddie. I'm a lying piece of shit. I'm a functional alcoholic. I will drink Klingon nerve gas and mix it with."
Oh, yeah.
A great line to us. Does it mix well with
Yeah.
Scotch
Well,
whiskey?
okay.
And then he says fuck, and he's like, I'm gonna go find out. And he goes off and just starts drinking.
He's supposed to be Scottish, and I think it's called single malt whiskey from Scotland.
If it's single malt.
But you're not supposed to mix anything with it. You're
Right.
supposed to mix fucking Tang with it.
I think
you can mix Tang. That it's already a mixer because it's Tang mixed with an alcohol suspension and Klingon nerve gas.
Yeah.
And then he wants to put whiskey in that.
There's
He's an alcoholic.
there's like old people drink what Rusty Nails, which is Scotch and Drambuie, but it's probably Scottish. I mean, I don't
And
know.
you'd probably
Drambuie
use
is just like Scotch with some
you'd use
herbs
a
in it or
blended
something.
Scotch in that case, probably like a Johnny Walker. Or
A
something.
blended Scotch you can mix.
So-
you're not supposed to mix a single malt.
That antidote that McCoy made, what he says, it deadens the nerve inputs to the brain. So
Yeah,
it makes people basically not give a shit about all the anger-inducing space. They don't care. What he essentially made was a mix of booze and pills.
Yeah.
He mixed booze and pills
Yeah.
together.
On the one
and
hand,
then now
he says it's
that's his cocktail, and it makes you not give a shit.
He's-
Then Scotty goes off
It's
and
like,
starts
yeah,
mixing it
it's
together and
basically
drinks
like you're
it.
not gonna
I was
give a
confused
shit.
by that
Yeah.
too because on the one hand he said it cured the problem and made people not go insane, which maybe it did. But then what he described, as you said, and as Scotty thought, was he just described a really fun time.
Yeah, right.
It just deadens the nerves.
I mean, Scotch and pills, you know.
You get hit with a
It's probably
phaser
good.
on stun and not even know.
You're right, though. It looked like Tang. It did look like some Tang.
That was a
there.
pitcher of Tang.
Yeah.
A beaker of Tang.
I don't
used
know.
to-
To
we
me,
used-
it looked like guava juice or something. There was a bit
Well,
of a viscosity to it.
There was. I don't know if people drank guava juice back then.
It's L.A.
In California.
In the
they
60s, we're
did.
crazy. It was
Okay,
pre ecstasy and cocaine, but post sexual revolution.
So they had guava juice.
So they had guava
on
juice.
tap.
In the 80s, when I would we'd go camping as a family, and my dad would take us camping. He'd always bring motherfucking Tang. That was the drink to bring. Was like some dried up Tang.
Yeah, it was instant.
And then people don't do that anymore, though. People don't really, not as much as they used to. It used to be more of a thing. So
because you can get like better containers of
better drink.
yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Which would you rather have, Kool-Aid or Tang?
I want Flavor Aid.
I'd rather have
what the people at Jonestown took.
tea.
That Flavor Aid, that's the way to go.
You know, fuck both of you for not like picking one of the choices I gave. I gave you 2 options, and I didn't want either.
I didn't know you had to pick this one. You didn't set it up as like
Oh,
if you had no choice.
I guess I picked one.
No, fuck you. I said,
fuck you, and fuck you.
I said, would you rather have Tang or Kool-Aid? That's all. There's no more explanation needed in that question.
Kool-Aid.
Okay. You don't have to answer it. I'm just saying. Don't pretend that like it was I worded it incorrectly.
I didn't say you worded it incorrectly.
You did. You said you did.
I did not say you worded it incorrectly. I said
Well, you said I wasn't clear. You said I wasn't clear.
I did not interpret it as one of those special circumstances where we had no choice but to pick one or the other. But in the case, the obvious answer is Kool-Aid anyway. Nobody should be saying Tang.
No.
Well, I said, would you rather have Tang or Kool-Aid?
Kool-Aid.
Okay.
You happy?
Just saying.
Tang was for like old people back then.
Yeah.
Tang was for space people.
And space people, yes.
Guava juice and Tang.
NASA.
So near the end, this was what I was confused about. I don't know if I just forgot some of the plot. Scott has a line where he says, and your fears about the phaser were correct. It blasted a hole right through that crazy space fabric, and only heaven knows where it sent the Defiant. Do you know what part I'm talking about?
Yes, I know what and I don't entirely know what he was talking about either.
What was there a point where they fired a phaser and it went through a wall?
They were shooting a phaser at the Tholians, but I think the assumption we're supposed to make is that this maybe relates back to the conversation about how they were trying not to disrupt shit by being all like not moving around, and then all of a sudden with the Tholians, like the lasers are going off and all sorts of shit's happening.
Oh, so they meant their ship phaser, not their.
So I think as a result, Scotty, my assumption again, I agree the information is insufficient, but my assumption is that Scotty is simply reporting back saying you are correct because we were shooting lasers around, shooting phasers. As a result, yes, the Defiant has now been pushed further or whatever into interphase space. Because remember, that's when Spock also figured out that the Kirk reappearing time had shifted, and
he said
it had adjusted the parameters of what was going on.
He says the captain remained. He says only the overlap time changed, and it says the next interface will occur here. When he said overlap time changed, I guess that just means Kirk was out of sync with the Defiant in terms of which phase he was in. Is that the deal? Like Kirk and the Defiant were out of sync with each other.
It is unclear.
Yeah.
But again, we're meant to be examining the breaking apart of the triumvirate.
Space is breaking up.
So, yeah, it begins with basically McCoy wants Spock to move away from the Defiant. That's where it all begins. And Spock doesn't want to, and McCoy thinks that Kirk's dead, and Kirk's like, get the fuck out of here. And then he's pissed because people are going crazy. He wants to move the ship out away again from the Defiant. And then the Tholians come, and McCoy's pissed because Spock locks phasers on the ship. Once again, he wants to retreat because he doesn't want to start shit. Then he's pissed because Spock fires on the ship. These are all times that McCoy's giving Spock shit. Not all of them. There were a few extra. And then McCoy goes nuts at Spock about not protecting the crew. Spock says, and when Spock's giving that speech where he says that Kirk's dead, he's like, McCoy wants to sit in on it, and Spock's like, no, you gotta focus on that antidote. Get the fuck out of here. I don't want you here. And McCoy's like, fuck you. They don't need me there. I'll stay here and give you shit. So that was them starting to clash, them trying to like power struggle with each other. And then afterwards, McCoy insisted, this is the part where McCoy was actually right. He insisted that Spock listen to Kirk's message. And Spock was like, we don't have time for that shit. And I thought that was uncharacteristic of Spock because, like, it was kind of implying that Spock wanted to keep the command of the ship, even though he didn't.
But the other interpretation
is... It didn't speak well for him because it's like, why is Spock not listening to Kirk's last words?
The other interpretation is he did not, because doing so would be a further admission that Kirk was dead. And at this, and Spock, just like with the funeral, again, if you interpret it from that lens, and maybe that's being generous, but that's what I got from the writing was Spock. It's difficult with Spock. Leonard Nimoy luckily is just such a great actor. He's able to convey a lot of this because of Spock's quote unquote unemotional nature. That's how he has to put himself forward, that it's difficult to portray him having trouble with this. And I think in order for this to make sense, if you just watched the Tholian web, had never seen Star Trek, weren't really familiar with Spock outside of popular culture, it might be more confusing than if you understand that this strange behavior, there has to be an explanation. We, like you said, is it that he's going mad from the space brain disease? Or is it because he does not want to admit to himself that Kirk is in fact gone forever? He was content with command, but he didn't want to, he wanted command to rescue Kirk. But if he watches that last order, which is only play this if I'm dead, then that's a further kind of, it's like with the whole grieving process thing. It's kind of like, okay, now I have to sort of believe that this is real. Even if I don't believe it, to some extent, I'm admitting to publicly to McCoy and to myself that maybe it is real.
That's a good point. It's interesting that McCoy gets this pissed off at Spock because this is season 3. You'd think they'd have time to come to some understanding with each other.
They still spar. Most of their fun times get in the movies.
Yeah, in the movies they spar, but it's fun sparring.
Yeah, it's
much more. But in this one, it's fucking serious. There's one part where McCoy's giving Spock shit. After that, he goes talking about Kirk. He says that Kirk's a hero in every sense of the word. He's a hero. He was a hero in every sense of the word, yet his life was sacrificed for nothing. The one thing that would have given his death meaning is the safety of the Enterprise. Now you've made that impossible. Yeah. And then Spock says, well, he would have done the same thing, basically. He said...
Spock was like, well, nuh-uh.
He said, he says the captain would have remained, had he done it. Yeah, Spock's like, nuh-uh. And then McCoy says, yes, he would have stayed, but you didn't have that decision to make. Why? Why does Spock not have that decision to make? Why is McCoy's saying you shouldn't have stayed back, and then Spock says Kirk would have stayed back. Then McCoy says, yeah, but you didn't have that decision to make. Why did he not have that decision?
Yeah, I don't know. It was his decision.
It literally was his decision to make. He's the captain, unless it's just McCoy super not accepting him as the captain, because he didn't actually call him captain until the end, and that signified okay, they're cool now.
I agree. It was confusing, and I took it to be maybe an inarticulate way to say that McCoy's point may have been, we're confident that he's dead. So that as a result, that decision is not there, and maybe, as opposed to the alternative hypothesis, it still doesn't fully make sense.
Yeah.
Right. You could come up with all sorts of excuses.
There's another line after that doesn't make sense. McCoy goes, I must admit I don't understand you, Spock, but I just can't believe that you would want Jim's command. You must know that if you get us out of this situation, they'll pin a medal on your chest and give you command of the Enterprise. Okay, McCoy thinks Spock just is doing this because he wants Kirk's command. Yeah. That doesn't make sense because Spock is the one trying to save Kirk, and McCoy's the one saying, let's get the fuck out of here, fuck Kirk. If it would make more sense...
Spock's like, I already have the ship.
It would make more sense if Spock would be trying to take command if Spock were fleeing.
How I took that?
Yeah, if Spock were fleeing, then he would be like, okay, Kirk's got out of the picture. Yeah. Now I get his command. Unless Spock lied and thought Kirk was dead the entire time and just wanted to look heroic.
Here's how I took that exchange. I took it as first McCoy saying, look, I can't believe that you were trying to take Kirk's command. The implication being that he does kind of think that's what's going on. He's saying, I can't believe it. In other words, there's an implication that there's some suspicion that he believes that. And given that fact, if that is true, McCoy is saying, if you want to be captain, hey, take us out of here, and then you get to be captain. No worries. Again, I think a possibly inarticulate way to convey that McCoy is suspicious of Spock somehow because he's confused by his behavior.
I guess that makes sense because when he says I just can't believe that you would want Jim's command, he's basically saying I'm in disbelief. I'm so disgusted that you want Jim's command, but I'm disbelieving it because that next line does make sense for what you say because he says if we've balled out, they'll give you a medal.
Yeah. And so I think he's trying to maybe be like, in order to save people, he's like, let's just do this.
Yeah,
let's
maybe
do the
trying
thing
to play to him or something. There was a last time I think after they made up basically was No, this was before they made up. When Spock straight up says, "Doctor, I'm in command of the Enterprise," and McCoy's like, "I would like to remedy that situation." He just straight up, at that point, he's like, "Spock, you suck. You're a piece of shit."
And then Spock is straight up like, "Hey, you're the fucking doctor. You can relieve me anytime. You got the balls.
right.
You got the balls to relieve me, Mr. McCoy."
Yeah.
Dr. McCoy, I should say.
And then after they make up, this was what I thought I was going to refer to, but now I'm going to refer to it.
All right, excellent.
When Spock says, "In critical moments, men sometimes see exactly what they wish to see." And then McCoy goes, "Do you suppose they're seeing Jim because they've lost confidence in you?" It's like, and this is after they made up, and McCoy makes this fucking snarky remark, and Spock is just like raises his eyebrows. He's like, "I was merely stating a fact, Doctor," which is Vulcan for "fuck you, man."
Yeah. But it's close.
But he was being chill, but McCoy was a chill, but somehow still fucking being an asshole about it.
Yeah, well, he's kind of an asshole. It's kind of his, it's kind of his deal.
Yeah.
But it's close to that exchange where Spock refers to McCoy as Bones. Now, granted, he's referring to him by quoting a hypothetical quote from Kirk, right? He's saying like, "Well, Jim would say, don't worry. What are you worried about, Bones?
What are you worried about? Don't even
worry about it." And interestingly enough, that is the only time ever that Spock refers to McCoy as Bones. There is a tidbit. So we have at least one insight from earlier and one tidbit. That's why you come to this podcast.
A tidbit.
You get a lot of talk.
Little bits and tiddly bits.
Guarantee at least one or two insights, a couple of tidbits.
I love the tidbits.
Bunch of odds and ends. We'll get to the odds and ends in a second.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I actually have the line what I was talking about earlier when they're talking about ship being programmed for interspace. Spock goes, "Are the ship's computers programmed for entry into interspace?" And then Chekhov, this is after Chekhov has gone crazy and now he's sane again. He goes, "Yes, sir. The ship can drive into interspace at any time." So they never, I don't remember them ever talking about them programming them to do that as that a plane. Maybe it's a cut scene or something. Did they cut scenes back then? I don't know. But like, that was never really part of the plot, and I'm still not clear like if that's how they got out of the Tholian web or
this
whatever.
This is a good episode. It's a great episode. I really enjoy this episode. It's a classic for a reason, but it is also a third season episode. There's less budget. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. Gene Roddenberry's pretty much shunted aside, and I learned that for this particular episode, they say it's directed by Herb Wallerstein. But it was originally directed by Ralph Sinensky. He was hired to direct it, and they kicked him off halfway through the production because he had fallen half a day behind. So they fired his ass, and so that's 60s TV. I'm sure it's intense today, but I don't know. That sounds pretty intense to be falling back behind a little bit, and they're like, "You're out of here."
Yeah,
well, they did like 30, this one was like 20 some episodes.
Yeah, they did a lot of episodes.
Really tight schedule.
But so I think the goofy costumes, in terms of the environmental suits and things, you see some of that lack of budget, that reduced budget, and to some degree reduced attention to detail to some of the storytelling. You've got a bunch of different writers in here. I think this was Judy Burns and Chet Richards wrote the original screenplay, but I believe not only was it changed a fair bit from what they submitted, I think they kind of submitted this unsolicited. I don't believe they were staff writers. I have to look that up. You can set us straight at feedback@itsgotstartrek.com if you know anything about Judy Burns or Chet Richards.
Those Tholian web went so slow. Now it was really just a dramatic device to add tension to the thing, but it was like, really, how do they?
The whole Tholian thing was just to do that.
I mean, I guess the Tholians already tried to attack and that didn't work, so they're like, well, we can try this. It's kind of slow, but maybe it'll at least get them out of here or something. But it was so slow. And then somehow
they could have left at any time.
And then somehow the in the past Tholians in Enterprise that were in
Much
the 100
quicker.
they were just like zap, and it just went like a motherfucker, and they just zapped them at each other. Whereas in this one, they like were spider webs. They'd come out of their
they had a few more. I think they had a
butt.
few more ships. And the Mirror Tholians in the past had a few more ships. This was like 2 ships. Just
kind of
doing a funny kind
meandering about,
dancing butt to butt.
Yeah.
Fucking O'Neill.
I know that O'Neill guy. Come on, learn your transporter business. Come on,
Mitchell.
What?
Mitchell, I'm not joking, Lee.
I'm not joking, Lee. O'Neill was not as cool as Lee or Mitchell.
All right.
Wait, that guy's name was Mitchell, right?
Gary Mitchell.
Yeah, Gary Mitchell. That's right.
All right, so now that we're talking about other episodes, I think it's time for odds and ends. I think we've concluded the main part of the analysis, and we're now shifting on to the odds and ends, which are a collection of unconnected bits and pieces, odds and ends.
I like to call them nooks and crannies.
Nooks and crannies, as Dan likes
but
to call
odds and
them.
end is more appropriate.
I'll give you one. Walter Koenig is really, really good at looking super concerned. Right at the beginning of the episode, in that opening teaser, it shows him just being looking like so fucking concerned. Everyone looks concerned, but Walter Koenig, like Chekhov, looks real fucking concerned. And the best part is they're just looking at a blank screen. So you're like, what are they so concerned about? And then Kirk goes on to sort of explain what's going on.
It was weird because Chekhov, they said he felt pain before he went crazy.
Botanipe?
And then, so he felt pain before he went crazy, but then Uhura at one point felt pain, but she didn't go crazy. She just ended up seeing Kirk, which didn't really make sense. And then later, was it O'Neill that went crazy? But he didn't feel pain. He got dizzy. So it was really inconsistent, like the pain, dizziness versus
Presents
what's going to
in
happen
different
to
ways,
you.
yeah. But always with the fisheye lens.
Always with the
And
fisheye lens.
Uhura, I don't think, had the fisheye lens.
I liked her flowing pajama nightgown
Her
thing.
quarters looked awesome.
And
Yeah.
the thing like that
Twisty
spinny
thing?
thing.
Yeah, the
that
spinny
looked like-
thing. I was like, I want that.
Uhura's quarters
Totally
looked
awesome.
so comfortable and awesome. Her off-duty dress was gorgeous.
Yeah, it was all
I mean,
flowing.
and she's gorgeous, of course, as well. Conversely, Kirk's quarters. We've seen Kirk's quarters a lot, but I really noticed the sort of, he has a couple of creepy little sculpture statues littered about the cabin.
Are they those sex statues?
The lights all perfect.
What's the sex?
They look close to being sex.
What's the sex statue Picard got?
The Jamahara?
Yeah.
No, it's the what is it? God damn it! What is it called? The thing that you put out to get Jamaharan.
Yeah.
You want to do Jamaharan.
I want to do Jamaharan to you.
God damn it! I can't believe I can't.
I want to do
remember the name of the
Ponfar to
dude.
you. What if you did Ponfar with someone who did Bahamaran to you?
I did. What if? All right, we have a new segment called What If. Email us at feedback@itsgotstartrek.com. Subject line: What if? Today's topic is what if you did, as Dan put it, what if you did Ponfar to somebody while they did Jamaharan to you?
Yeah, what if? What then? What then?
Interpret those statements however you like.
What if cars were sandwiches? What then? So speaking of crazy space,
Odds and ends.
they expect Scott to prevent the crazy space from taking over the ship. I thought that was an unreasonable request because
Horgon.
A Horgon.
because the reason
Problematic name, but it was the 80s, late 80s.
one of the reasons this looks like you're about to say something, Jesse.
No. I'm listening to what you're
The
saying.
reason the ship was one of the main reasons the ship was going shitty was because space was all bent around. And like they're like Spock's like, Scott, fix that shit. And it's like, what is he supposed to do against the force of space tearing your shit apart?
He'll find a way, man.
But that's not even that's not a symptom of a ship problem. It's a symptom of a fucking space universe problem. And you can't fight that shit.
It's a physics problem.
It's not a job for an engineer.
You can't fight space.
It's not a job for a warp core engineer or whatever, you know. Anyways, I just thought that was a lot to ask of the man. I felt sorry for
I
him.
don't know. I think you could. That guy gets a lot of stuff done, man.
Well, they should cut him some slack. Oh, and speaking of engineering stuff, did you ever think I always thought it was funny that giant. I always forget it's there, but that giant satellite dish at the bottom of the Enterprise that just like sits
the
at the
deflector dish.
Deflector dish. Is that for long range sensors?
It's for plot.
I hope
For
so.
plot.
They use it all sorts
I think
of different ways.
it's awesome because it must be so huge and it's just a big silly satellite dish.
Remember in
thing.
First Contact, they go out and they kind of disconnect it and they're like walking around with
Yeah,
it.
they did exactly what they should have, which is like explore that thing.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. So-
McCoy at one point says lower decks. He's referring to crewmen on the lower decks. And that's the name of a TNG episode and an entire series of Star Trek.
it is.
Which will be having new episodes
Yeah, pretty soon.
next week.
Spock.
No,
Spock.
next month.
You keep sounding like you're ending your sentence, and then you keep saying more sentence.
That's his trick. That's his
That's
gimmick.
what I do.
Yeah.
Man.
Spock all goes, Lieutenant Uhura is correct. there was murderous fury in Chekhov. I like that.
Meanwhile, did you know
murderous fury?
Did you see how they had it?
That's Spock's intense thing for Spock to say.
Did you see how they had Chekhov strapped down in sickbay?
They were seatbelts. They were just
and not only were they, first of all, yes, they were like Volvo seatbelts or something. Secondly, they not only were not futuristic, they didn't look futuristic. I mean, the '60s would have had better restraints.
Yeah, right.
In a mental institution or
he was making all those funny noises.
They just wrapped it around his wrists a couple times and then tied it down.
I thought you said Baldo seatbelts, and for a while I couldn't figure out what you said. You said Volvo.
Yes, not Baldo.
I was like, what?
Baldo.
Did you ever notice that the Volvo symbol is the male symbol? It's the circle with the little arrow.
Oh,
take a look. Once you see it,
yeah.
once you see it,
I thought you meant you meant the U.S. Postal Service, the mail with that eagle that looks like a dude who's doing a hula hoop.
I don't know.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
You know, on the side of the trucks, that eagle they had drawing the U.S. Postal Service.
You think it looks like a guy doing in a hula hoop?
Yeah, with a big and he has one of those hats that's speedwalker hats. You know, that go all far back. They're like laser beam hats that go all far back.
Do you mean like when I've never seen a speedwalker?
There's
I've
so
seen
many interpretations about like everybody has a different interpretation like about that image of the Postal Service, like that eagle.
Yeah,
but it shouldn't be like astrology where you can just say it's a bear.
No, but it looks like
it's like a Rorschach test.
It looks like
an eagle.
No, but it also looks like a dude.
Blob.
I'm not making up what I see. What I see is an eagle, but I also see a dude with a hula hoop and a speedwalk. Like in Malcolm in the Middle, there's an episode. And I don't know if this is what speedwalking hats really look like, but it was on Malcolm in the Middle. How got onto speedwalking, and it like goes
like some kind of Tron thing.
And it has a tail that goes down a few feet in the back, and that's what it looks like it's wearing. But that's what I thought. I was confused by it at first, and then one day it clicked. But male, you're talking about Volvo, male symbol. Yeah, you're right. I meant to do the math on this, and I forgot. So the Tholians.
Should we just pause the podcast until you can do the calculation?
Yeah, it's probably not that hard, I guess. But so the Tholians, when Chekhov was like, the Tholians are coming, he says they're 200,000 kilometers away, and they're going 0.51 C, which is just over the speed, half the speed of light, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then
0.51 checks out.
And then 25 seconds of episode time, like I timed it on a stopwatch. After he said that, to the next time he said their distance, I timed the amount of time between that, assuming that time was real time. It was 25 seconds later. The Tholians were now not 200,000 kilometers away. They were now 25 seconds later, 90,000 kilometers away. Does that math work out? Would they travel?
You're the only one that can answer.
Would they travel 110?
Jesse and I are unequipped to handle this.
Would they travel 110,000 kilometers per hour in 25 seconds? No, not per hour. Let me start over. Would they travel 110 kilometers in 25 seconds if they were traveling at a speed of just over half the speed of light?
Okay, we have a new segment
you are
called.
Asking the wrong
this
person.
new segment is called "You Do the Math."
Yeah, you do the math.
Please write us at feedback@scottStarTrek.com.
Physics.
We'll have the
Subject
answer
line,
next week.
You do the math. You need to do the calculation. 200,000 miles to 90,000. 200,000 kilometers to 90,000 kilometers at 0.51 C. Does that equal 25 seconds of travel time?
Yeah.
You do the math. New segment. We're not going to offer any prizes, but we'll say your name if you email us in with the answer, and to please elaborate on the answer and show your work. Then we will happily announce your name on the internet.
This knowledge is its own prize.
It's basically how long does it take to go 110,000 kilometers if you're going 0.51 C?
It's an extremely simple calculation that we could have done live while we were having this discussion, but we opted instead to entertain and to delight instead of actually providing you with any useful information.
I couldn't have done that.
So
I only went up to like algebra 2 or something.
So
I think this is fairly basic arithmetic.
Yeah, this is arithmetic. There's no carry. There's no like cancel the x or anything like that.
We are all capable of doing this. We're just lazy.
Yeah,
we're lazy, and we're live. We're live on the air.
Live. Where's this happening? Call
lazy.
in.
As Freddie Mercury famously said, "The show must go on."
Did he say that?
Yeah.
I thought
in their last album before he died.
But I thought Bugs Bunny said that too. Didn't Bugs Bunny say that at one point?
Yeah, okay. So we'll go behind the scenes here quickly, audience. Normally, it's not appropriate to explain the joke. In this case, Dan, the joke was that if obviously Freddie Mercury didn't say that, but I was referencing the fact that he had a song called "The Show Must Go On."
Okay.
And that the humor partly derives from the fact that obviously Freddie Mercury did not come up with that phrase and was merely utilizing it. But I was referencing Freddie Mercury, which is both cool and funny because, he's an artist from long ago.
That's really funny.
It is really funny. It's less so that we had to go through the process of explaining it.
But even if you didn't explain it and I got it, it would have been really funny.
Exactly. Right. Well, next week we'll do better.
even if you didn't have to explain it.
Odds and ends.
That Tholian was named Loskeen or something like that.
Yeah.
And he had that. So every creature that doesn't have a mouth in Star Trek, whether it's the Tholian or
They talk like this.
oh yeah, exactly. Or including like that planet from the animated series that was all lonely. Remember at the end, it's like so lonely.
That was James Doohan.
They all have that nasally voice, and computers don't have mouths. They sound the same way. Everything. If you don't have a mouth, you go. Error. I'm so stressed out. I don't have a mouth.
I'm made of crystal.
So yeah.
All right.
Odds and ends.
That's a good odd and end.
I'm so
Thanks.
hungry. Where do I put the food?
I thought that
a bummer.
the funeral scene demonstrated quite a bit of diversity among the crew. If you pause the scene and actually look at who's there, particularly in the context of the 60s, I think some later iterations of Star Trek, in fact, had much less diverse crews at times in terms of collective people and the extras they hired. But I thought that was cool. There were a variety of ethnicities and races and ages, gender, etc. Within the limits that you're going to find in a 60s network television show. I thought this went pretty far, which was pretty cool.
So you know how Spock always says sensors? Mm-hmm. Sulu said sensars.
He's Russian. They invented it.
And
Russian? Sulu's not Russian.
Sorry, I thought you said Chekhov.
The second time he says sensors, he doesn't say sensors. He says it more like sensors, like once, and then he goes back to saying
Who's
sensors.
Spock?
Yeah.
He forgot.
It's like early in the episode. He says sensors.
See,
he says sensors, and then he says sensors.
Remember when Billy D. Williams said Han instead of Han Solo?
Yeah.
Yeah, he kept saying a hand.
Yeah.
I do remember that.
I remember watching it with this kid, and he was like, "It's not a hand, it's Han."
Yeah, he knows better.
I heard that they were originally considering hiring Yaphet Kotto to play instead of Billy D. Williams to play Landau Calrissian. That would have been a different story.
Definitely.
Yaphet Kotto's pretty rocking. I love Billy D. Williams. Would have been different.
Billy D. Williams, his full name is William December Williams.
Whoa.
It's pretty tight.
That's what
pretty
the
tight.
D
Billy
stands
D.
for December.
Billy Williams.
It's kind of cool.
So what Kirk basically said, Spock should use some intuition and McCoy should stop being so ornery. So after all that was over, McCoy goes, Spock, I'm sorry. And he goes, it does hurt, doesn't it? And then Spock goes, what would you have me say, Doctor?
Because he's
What
a Vulcan.
hurts? What hurts
He's a
so?
Vulcan,
Kirk being dead hurts.
Oh, he's being like,
And Spock is saying, I can't admit that I feel bad.
Yeah, right.
What
It's-
would you have me say to
yeah,
that?
That's
he's-
when McCoy is-
which is
is
basically him
trying
admitting
to-
that he feels bad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying earlier. It's like,
Okay.
that's
I think
the
you were.
deal.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
It's subtle. It's subtle.
Yeah.
Perhaps too subtle for our modern eyes, our modern ADD eyes and ears that have to have the information poured directly into our eyeballs and brains.
Well, I just thought that there were many interpretations, and I was wondering which one that you guys felt was most appropriate.
Which type of person is that voice caricaturing?
It's the person who does this.
I know a few of those people.
What about people who talk with so much fun?
All right. Any more odds and ends?
I got to talk with.
Any more odds and ends? We're getting near the end of this business.
I think
The
I
end
had
of episode 83 of the It's Got Star Trek podcast.
Holy
It's
shit.
nigh. It's nigh.
Are we slipping into interspace? So there's so.
Hope not.
What's the material?
It's like a drag. I had a whole universe to
McCoy-
myself.
Oh yeah, how did he know he had a whole universe to himself?
Well, I think he was in a black void, I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, you need some long-range sensors at least to figure that out. You can't just look around.
All right, Captain Semantics.
Space is fucking empty, man.
Yeah, but if you were in if we took you and locked you in a trunk, I happen to have one, if we locked you into your trunk and it was all dark and stuff, in a sense, particularly if Jesse and I wandered off and went and did something else and you heard no sounds or other inputs, it would feel like you were in a universe.
Yeah, and I would be like, I must be in a universe all by myself. And then you'd open the trunk and be like, oh, I was just in the trunk of a car.
It's like
Silly me.
They're never coming back.
Yeah, I'm like a dog. I'm like a dog. I forget things exist.
It's like we open up the trunk and it's like, oh, we forgot about you. It's like, oh, I thought you guys would never come back.
The last odd and end I have is that I loved the part where at the very end where Spock and McCoy decided to totally troll Kirk.
It was bizarre because the music didn't even match up to the lighthearted music.
Yeah.
It was like it ended on this sort of confused note, which is and Kirk was excessively confused.
And Spock was lying.
Scott was why?
But lying mostly by omission and just sort of making facial expressions, being like, well, and Kirk was so confused because he was like, wait a second. And his feelings were hurt and he was embarrassed. And McCoy and Spock were straight up like, we can see our friend who we thought was dead and we were upset about it to the point of almost killing each other. Now he's alive, and we're happy that he's alive, and his reward for being alive is that we're going to make him feel like shit.
We're never going to speak of it again.
You rarely see Kirk so sheepish as he was.
I know. It was kind of bizarre. It ended all weird and confusing, and then it of course switched the ship, and after it was like do 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 do. It went to do 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 do, and then it goes. It goes from the Price is Right losing song to
Feels so good.
to the dun 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 dun,
Mangione.
to like make it sound like it's all on a positive note, but really it was confusing.
That's what the end music is always like getting ready. It's getting ready to do the fanfare. It's like
Are you talking about Star Trek?
Yeah, Star Trek.
Oh yeah. So McCoy, I can understand why someone would lie because they were feeling sheepish about it, but like, why was Spock wouldn't feel sheepish.
No,
why?
they were trolling him.
They were Spock just felt like fucking around.
They're like, it's more hilarious, but you could argue it's pride on both their parts because they're both trying to not be embarrassed by the fact
pride,
that they.
Once again, that's not something that.
No, but okay, the different. Okay. Always remember that, first of all, Vulcans are lying pieces of shit and they're not perfect Vulcans. Secondly, Spock is half Vulcan, half human, so he's got that in him anyway, as we see repeatedly.
That just sneaks out.
Including in this episode.
It sneaks out in these weird, sharp, mean kind of ways.
His dad was a sneaky bastard.
Yeah, that's true.
But in this case, I think it could be a pride thing, but a very specific pride thing. Not a pride thing like a personal ego thing, as much as neither Spock nor McCoy wanted to give Kirk the pleasure of admitting that, you were right. I mean, imagine if you're like bickering with a family member or something, and then you see the tape of a dead family member, and they're straight up explaining exactly what you were just doing. How embarrassing that would be to you, and how if you had the opportunity. I'm not saying this is right. I'm saying I understand the psychology behind wanting to be like, man, fuck you for knowing us so well. Fuck you for being such a good friend that you know us so well that you precisely predicted how we would react if I die. It's like, I'm dead, and I'm going to explain to you how it is. I can understand both of them being like, you know what? Fuck that dude.
Yeah, Kirk definitely he gave himself the edge by like predicting what they were going to do. He made himself alpha in that scenario.
He was dead and he was out. As far as they were concerned, he was dead and he was alphaing all up and down their crazy asses.
So I wanted to mention, just the two substances they talked about. They talked about Therigan. So first of all, McCoy was saying Therigan. He thought that it was a Therigan derivative that would make the antidote. I don't know if that.
I think it's a theremin derivative that plays the Star Trek theme song.
So I don't.
Music joke.
Yeah,
you gotta appreciate that, Dan. You're a musician. Yeah. I'm not.
So.
You mad that I'm encroaching on your world?
No.
He mentions it a couple of times. There's a bit of a build-up for that Therigan.
Yeah, and so he says it's a derivative, but I don't know if it actually is made from that. It's made from basically Klingon nerve gas and alcohol, so I don't know if it's...
With a bit of tang.
But, so I looked... With a bit of tang. So I looked this up, and instead of taking me directly to Memory Alpha, or is that the what Star Trek, whatever, Memory Alpha? Oh, that's the general nerd wiki, right? Is Memory Alpha?
Memory Alpha, it's under fandom.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. I wasn't making that up. But this is just some WebMD shit. It says Therigan cream. It's used to treat minor aches and pains of the muscles and joints, like arthritis,
But consult your
backache.
doctor because you might have cancer.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what WebMD always says.
So right.
Could be nothing. It could be you're
Could be
dead.
cancer.
You're already dead.
It's the same thing.
Your ghost is looking up the internet.
It's the same thing when you go to like forums about car troubles. It's like, oh, your car is toast, and it turns out it's just some weird switch. So Therigan is actually a real thing. Then there's the triox compound they used.
That's got like a whole bunch of extra oxygen in it.
Why did they use the triox compound on Kirk?
Because he had run out of air.
Oh yeah.
He was epoxic.
Yeah. So
they've used that other times. In
yeah. So triox was a simplified, but it says was a simplified but effective intravenous. Oh, this is memory alpha.
Yeah, they always refer to things as if they are some sort of Q living in eons in the future and referring to Star Trek as history.
Yeah, right. So the triox.
That's the conceit.
Whereas the Therigan is real on WebMD, the triox is a Star Trek thing. It's a intravenous medicine used for rapidly oxygenating the blood cells. So triox is fake. Therigan is real.
Yes. Good. Excellent. Any other odds and ends? We've solved the triox dilemma. Anything else? Going once.
Chekhov got to 0, but they didn't go to inner space right away. Oh yeah, he was counting down to inner space. He said inner space in 15 seconds. That's my Chekhov impression. Inner space in 15 seconds.
Interface.
And then he got down to 0, and they didn't do it.
Sounds like your Janeway impression.
They didn't. Chakotay.
Tom Paris.
Salamanders. We had sex. But it's funny. Haha, it's not awkward at all because we were salamanders, and that's not awkward either.
I can't wait to do that.
That's not awkward either.
I got him to do a Janeway, and we weren't even doing a Voyager.
And I warped into
I
something
mainly
else.
try to manipulate Dan into doing Charles Trip Tucker III. That's my favorite.
Yeah.
That gets me.
Tucker III.
That gets me to sleep at night.
Surrogate.
You know what I mean?
These medical beds. Hey, it's seatbelts and restraining straps.
You should start doing
Paul.
just Mirror Tucker.
To Paul.
Mirror Tucker was so sleepy.
To Paul. What happened to my eyeball?
My face is melting off.
You mind melded with me.
This is all in reference to In a Mirror Darkly, which if you are unaware of that particular episode, you should watch it and then listen to last week's podcast.
You weren't listening to our podcast,
which was episode 82 of the podcast. So anything else?
So we don't. So when Kirk was appearing, we don't know why he was appearing, and it wasn't on the Defiant. He was just floating around space, and sometimes he'd appear on the ship and start saying stuff, but we don't know what he's saying, and it's just
they just wanted a ghost story.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and they got it.
Okay.
I mean, they could have done more of a ghost story. I think it could have been improved if there was a little bit less madness and more hauntingness. But I'm not going to quibble.
I will say it was a good. I enjoyed that episode. I thought it was an entertaining episode. Yeah. I wish they went a little. I wish there was a little less mystery on the part of what was happening with the Defiant and stuff. Yeah. But whatever.
They do improve on this in modern Trek, and then of course they go too far in some cases. Voyager, as we know, sometimes overplots things where you start to lose the characterizations. Not always by any means, but it dip into it. So it's a bit of a course correction. You go one way, you go the other. TOS is early on. They haven't entirely figured out what's going on. And of course, this is the third season when they were already canceled once. They don't expect to be on the layer long. They don't expect to turn into a cultural phenomenon that people are going to nitpick over this shit for the next 50, 60 years.
Right. So McCoy and Spock, it was interesting that they had that exchange, that whole exchange they were having was really interesting part of the story. It's funny because then you watch Star Trek documentaries and it says Gene Roddenberry didn't want any sort of strife between crew members. So you happen to mention he was less part of Star Trek at that point.
Yes.
So he probably would have not been cool with that sort of.
But it's also important to note that philosophy of Roddenberry became more...
Was it romanticized? Or
no. It was a real thing, but it was more in the TNG era, where he felt when it came to doing TNG, he was in...
it was a later thing.
And he was in a power position. Whether it's a later thing or not is more debatable, but the understanding from what I've read in all the wonderful books on the behind-the-scenes stuff is
wonderful toys.
These wonderful books.
Toys!
That
remember the movie Toys?
That Roddenberry, ever since The Cage, Roddenberry did what he could with Star Trek, and he did a good job with it, obviously, but that it was always a compromised vision, right? Because already from going to the cage to where no man has gone before, he needed to add more action, needed to make it a little less quote unquote cerebral as per the producers and all that. And so, but when it came to TNG, he had more power and more leverage because now he had a studio coming to him saying, we want you to make this show. And he's like, all right, well, I'm going to make it the way I fucking want to make it. Similar to the George Lucas with the prequels kind of thing. And he got shoved to the side.
Better.
Yeah. But in the first few seasons of TNG, there's a lot of stumbling blocks because he was trying to do it a certain way. And it wasn't quite exactly Star Trek because Star Trek did have some of that.
In the second episode,
stuff.
not only did they not have inter-crew strife, instead they had inter-crew sex.
Which what are you talking about?
Wasn't that the second episode where they didn't have...
Oh, in TNG?
In TNG, not only did they not strife with each other, they in fact did the opposite.
Yeah, where no one has gone before.
They did the opposite and all wanted to fuck each other.
Or the whatever.
Naked.
So that's what they should have done.
Yeah, the naked now.
So if you're not going to have a crew fight with each other, then you should just have them fuck each other all the time.
I think the naked time was the TOS.
Because it's all about fucking or fighting, right?
Yes, it's all about.
That's what it's all about.
That's what it's like the pokey.
And it intersects at getting a nicely made Peking duck.
Yep, there you go.
That solves the problem of the fucking or fighting. Nobody's going to be fucking or fighting when you got a table full of Peking duck.
I agree.
Right? I think most of us can agree on that.
I think that's a good bookend.
Scallions.
All right, good. So we don't know what we're talking about next week yet.
Probably TNG.
We don't know what we're talking about right now. Hey!
But we will post what we're talking about next week on our social media.
Or maybe we won't.
And the social media, we will.
Fuck you. We will. No, but seriously, we will.
No, for real though. For real,
fuck you.
For real though. And our social media, easy to find.
Apple Podcast.
Apple Podcast.
It's got Star Trek on Twitter and Instagram.
YouTube Music.
Facebook. You can find us on YouTube.
What are you talking about?
YouTube Music.
You can find us on Apple Podcasts and iTunes and Spotify and Amazon.
iPod Shuffle.
Pandora and I think Pandora, all this shit. Google,
Sony
whatever.
Walkman.
You can do whatever. You can record it. You can record it to tape and listen to it to a long play.
Put it on a tape.
Put it on one
Zune.
long play
Play
tapes.
a bunch of your favorite tapes.
Zune.
So you can get us anywhere. Tell your friends.
Zune.
Like and subscribe.
Apple Podcasts.
What is Zune?
Leave.
Wasn't that the alternative to iPod?
You said it was the Microsoft. It's just so funny to refer to it. You're right. It is an alternative to iPod. It's just funny. It's like it's an alternative to iPod.
Yeah, right.
It's like the marketing.
It's like Bing.
Yeah,
Microsoft Zune, an alternative to iPad.
Yeah, because that's all it basically is now, right? It's either iPod or nothing.
It's not
all the
even-
kids listen to the iPods now. They have
No,
screens.
they don't!
They have screens on them so you can watch video on them.
No, those are iPods from 2011.
They have the little circly dial, and you spin it, and you can watch videos on them.
Those are in a museum. Those are in a museum.
Belongs in a museum.
Kids laugh at that shit.
They're called museums.
You gotta use your. You gotta use
Cars.
Your hands. Okay, so I think this will conclude things for us this week. You'll figure out.
so.
You follow us on social media. Write reviews for us that are glowing and 5-star and all that stuff. That's super awesome. Why not? You listen this far. Why not just go and clickety-click on the thing and click 5 stars? These guys are rad.
Hey.
Type that. All that. Rad. These guys are rad. Rad. And things that rhyme with rad. Go for it. And,
All the different cars.
Sad.
yeah, rad. These guys are rad. They aren't sad. I mean, sometimes we're sad, but we try not to bring that to the show if we can help it.
But we're not Chad.
We're not Chads and we're not Chavs
No.
for our friends in England. So I don't think so anyway.
No.
But anyway, so we will follow our social media, find out our business. You'll follow along. And who knows? You're going to listen to this out of order anyway, because you're going to listen to this when you decide to watch the Tholian web.
That's
and then you're
what
going
you
to
should
load
do.
up
Stop being
this
so fucking
podcast.
selfish. Don't you hate that? Fucking, don't be a taker. Don't be a taker. Give us money. Don't be a taker. Fuck that
You
shit.
can send us money. We'll tell you. Just email us, and we'll give you our Venmo.
You do the math.
You can Venmo us.
You
some
do the
money.
math.
And otherwise, we will be talking at you again at roughly this time next week on a topic presumably related to Star Trek, and that'll be. Dan is holding up his finger. He wishes to make a final statement as we conclude the show.
It's called the It's Got Star Trek podcast. You do the math.
yeah. Please do submit to the You Do the Math.
Pointed really hard when I said that.
You did point. We'll get video at some point. We'll do a video podcast, and then you can see. Dan
we just have to have like 3 cameras, and that way you can do it in post.
Yeah, you can just do everything in post.
Yep.
It's all about post. All right, so we hope you have a good week.
It's the post with the most.
And we will, you'll hear from us next week or whichever podcast you pick them out of order. They're evergreen. You can pick them in any order you want. You're going to listen to these things in order. But if you choose to, hey, that's great. Like and subscribe. All right, we'll talk to you later.
Listen on the toilet.
And in this derivative, mixed with alcohol, it merely deadens certain nerve inputs to the brain.
Oh, well, any decent blend of scotch will do that.
Well, one good slug of this, and you could hit a man with phaser stun, and he'd never feel it or even know it.
Does it make a good mix with scotch?